I think it was right to withhold the use of British bases, and also right then to allow them to be used for defensive operations. But it would have been better if the Prime Minister had made all that clear in one go to the Americans, I think, and say, look, we won't be joining you with the bombing of Iran. We don't agree with that, or see what the objective is. But the Iranians are bound to hit back, and then we will help you out. You can use our bases to help you out. That's one decision, rather than presenting it as two decisions that looks like a U-turn. So I think it could have been presented better.
Now let's start there with the most important story of the day, potentially of the decade, you might even say. What is going to happen in the Middle East? Harry Cole was talking to President Trump at about sort of 3 or 4 o'clock this morning, our time, and then we got the outcome of it about 7 o'clock. And this is what Trump said. It's a different world, actually. It's just a much different kind of relationship that we've had with your country before. He says he tells Harry Cole, Keir Starmer should have supported his attacks on Iran, but it didn't matter that he didn't. William, on these days, I'm sure you wish you were in the Foreign Office with your sleeves rolled up. Keir Starmer, it's easy to talk about U-turns and flip-flops and not being quite having the courage of his convictions. On the flip side, if you don't think Donald Trump knows what he's doing, why should you support him? What would you have done in his position? How willing to be critical of him are you?
I'm not that critical of him. I think it's been rather badly presented, but I think broadly the government has reacted in the right way. Trump has not been clear on his objectives. It's not clear what the aim of the war is. It's possible, as you've just been discussing, although unlikely, that regime change can be achieved by bombing. It's pretty unlikely. There's no successful precedent for that. So I think it was right to withhold the use of British bases, and also right then to allow them to be used for defensive operations. But it would have been better if the Prime Minister had made all that clear in one go to the Americans, I think, and say, look, we won't be joining you with the bombing of Iran. We don't agree with that, or see what the objective is. But the Iranians are bound to hit back, and then we will help you out. You can use our bases to help you out. That's one decision, rather than presenting it as two decisions that looks like a U-turn. So I think it could have been presented better. But this is not unprecedented, by the way. There have been disagreements over the decades between the United States conducted the whole Vietnam War without the United Kingdom getting involved. Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister, steadfastly refused to get involved. Margaret Thatcher fell out very much with Ronald Reagan for a short time over when the Americans invaded Grenada without telling her. So it's not unprecedented for there to be disagreements over these things. Of course, given Trump's attitude, rather vengeful attitude to people who cross him, it could turn out to be more serious in this case.
It also, the thing that I find slightly inconsistent is we've been told that Starmer's great success of the last 16 months or so has been sucking up to Trump, and he's amazing at keeping in with Trump and knowing how to talk to Trump, and that's been seen as an end in itself. Well, if that's the case, he should have supported Trump, because he doesn't actually involve much more than allowing bases for the Americans to use in their own activity. If the grand Foreign Office aim is to suck up to Trump, why not just do that? And if it isn't, then why have we been doing it for the last 15 months?
Well, that's a very good point. And sucking up doesn't work in this case. It gets you through a meeting. But Trump only respects strength. And there are leaders who manage to have a decent relationship with him while making clear they have a different approach. Mark Carney of Canada is a very good example of that. So I think, the Prime Minister might have got that wrong over the last few months, even if he's now getting this right. And I suspect we will see more of this, because Trump, as he comes into his second year now of 4 years in office, and there could be a very difficult third and fourth year if there's a divided Congress in America, might get more unpredictable and do more outrageous things. So there are bound to be more differences between Britain and America, and it might be better to make that clear and be ready for that, rather than as what you described as the sucking up attitude all the time.
Yeah, Kezia, are you happy with what Keir Starmer's done over the last 48 hours?
I'm not sure anybody can use the word happy given the set of circumstances, but I do think it was the right call, and it shouldn't surprise us in many ways that the Prime Minister has responded in this way. He's a man who will always be led by the law, and he's taken the view that international law is very much against what Donald Trump has done in this instance. He's also somebody who's always going to put national security first. So it's not a surprise, really, that he's made that delineation between offensive and defensive when it comes to the use of UK or British bases. And ultimately, I think we're looking at a US president who's increasingly erratic, who can't make up his mind what the rationale or justification for this action is. It wasn't so long ago that Donald Trump was telling us that the last attempt to attack Iran had totally obliterated their defense capabilities. And now we're being told that we face an imminent threat because of Iran's ability to renew those capabilities. So the plan isn't clear, but the law is. And I think Keir Starmer, in that sense, has done the right thing here.
William, international law to me is one of the great fantasies of the modern world. It doesn't exist. It exists when you want to justify something. It doesn't exist when you don't. We all know, look at Iraq, for example. You can find legal justification to get you in. You can have a row about it thereafter. Justice is only administered by the victors. If you're powerful, no one will ever call you to account. Even Putin, who's not particularly powerful necessarily and may not be a victor, is never going to see the inside of a courtroom or a cell. We worship at the altar of international law when it suits us, and in reality it doesn't actually exist. It's the Santa Claus of diplomacy.
Well, I think you might be putting that too strongly. I mean, I think when I was Foreign Secretary and we made the intervention in Libya, and of course we can argue now about whether that was right or not.
But it didn't work, did it?
But we did. I mean, it hasn't solved the problem in Libya. It might have saved lives at the time, but it certainly hasn't solved the problem. That's one of the awkward precedents for what's happening in Iran now. But we were very strictly only going to do it if it had United Nations authority. And we did, and I worked hard as Foreign Secretary to get the United Nations Security Council to pass a resolution authorizing what we did. If we hadn't got that resolution, we would not have bombed Libya. So international law can count for a lot.
But would it have mattered? Would it have mattered, William, if you hadn't had it? I mean, because if you wanted to do it and you ended up doing it, the fact that the deeply compromised UN supported it makes no difference in the real world, does it?
Well, it does make a lot of difference in the real world, because that for everything that happens afterwards, that means you acted with complete legal authority as well as the support of the British Parliament, and that's different from people taking you to the international court and everything afterwards to seek redress for it. So it does make, but your point that it's weaker, it's definitely got weaker. Putin ignores it. Trump is ignoring it. China, if it did something on Taiwan, would just have its own interpretation of international law. Yet we have to try and hang on to international, because otherwise you are in a completely lawless world where all countries are at each other's throats, and anybody can do anything to anybody. And that is going to be a very expensive and very dangerous world to live in. So it is important to try to keep legal structures alive in the world, and so that they can be built on again in the future and rescued in the future.
William, can I ask you for your view before we move on to talk about some political polling, domestic political polling? There's this amazing story in the Financial Times, which is about the intelligence work that went on behind the operation of killing the Ayatollah. And it suggests that nearly all traffic cameras in Tehran were hacked by Israel for years, which meant that they knew when members of the IRGC, for example, the protection unit, the Ayatollah's bodyguards, when they came and went to work. And interestingly, the CIA also had a human source which was assisting with their efforts on locating him. I mean, how unusual is that to be able to wage a campaign of that significance over that period of time?
Well, I'm not surprised to hear those. They clearly had very, very good intelligence on the movements of all the Iranian leaders. That's why so many of them were killed at the very beginning on Saturday morning. The same thing happened with the Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon not so long ago. What you're seeing now is data analytics merged with some old techniques, of human sources and infiltrating the electronics and some of it. But now you can do that on a huge scale, and you can, assisted by AI, run the analysis that really gives you things in real time and shows you where somebody is, even if just from the movements of their bodyguards or their families, or not their own movements. So the world has really moved on. Leaders can now be picked off and assassinated, and it's another reason why we have to defend ourselves against that sort of thing in the future. You have to be at the forefront of these capabilities. We need, for me, the argument about Keir Starmer is not how he's reacted to this. It is that we're not investing enough in our own defense and our own capabilities in the world we've entered into. But so, yes, I'm not that surprised. I am slightly surprised they've revealed this, that they're in the traffic cameras and things in Tehran, because you can be sure all those traffic cameras will now be taken down. So they ought to have kept that secret if that is the case.